I was hoping for a raise, little bit crave, trying to understand my.
Yeah, what's up, guys? It's that kind of story here again, and today, we're going to talk about something intriguing. So imagine if you're trying to perform calculations, and then you'd want to know how to maybe freeze a certain cell or freeze a certain column, in your Excel sheet, and you don't know how to do that because you just want to continue perform the calculations on that number. When you're dragging down the cell, your when you're dragging down the cursor down the cells. And yeah, because normally in Excel, if you're drawing your cursor down the cells, it will just be replicating with other respective cells, in your sheet. But there's any time you just have a particular number that you want to keep using as repetition, to maybe add or multiply, you know, other series of numbers. And then you wonder how do you do that? So that's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to show you how to do that, how to freeze your columns, how to freeze your rows, basically freezing the cell, when you're performing calculations. So let's jump into it. We're just going to jump right into it, to keep the video short and simple. So yeah, so we're going to use sums to, and then so the very first thing I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try and freeze the column. So I'm going to try and freeze this column, which is column F. I'm going to try and freeze column F and then perform calculations using these numbers here, just addition calculations. So say equals to sum, and then to freeze you use a dollar sign. So to freeze a column, because we're saying dollar sign, because that's to freeze, then we're trying to freeze the column F, which is this column, you know, which is this column here. So we come here and say F, and then 2 would now be the location of the cell. I mean, so we're going to leave that to be flexible, we'll leave it to be very a variable. And then you get the second number, I would say B4, and then we enter. So it's 9. So basically 4 plus 5 is 9. So now because I freeze that column, if I drag it down, it's still gonna work with that column, even if it wasn't frozen. It's still gonna work with that column. So we have 34 plus 6 will give you 40, 23 plus 8 will give you 31. But then if I now drag this to this place, on a normal circumstance, if I drag it to the right, it's now meant to be reflecting this column, which is column G. But then if you check it, it's still column F because it has been frozen. So it's adding, so what it's doing is adding 5, which is C. So it's adding 5 plus um C6, which is, sorry, F4, which is 8. So it's adding 5 plus 8, because that column has been, frozen. And then it gives you what, 13. If I drag it up, it's adding 45 plus 6, I believe, which is F3, which is 6. 45 plus 6. So because that column has been frozen, so wherever I take it to, it's always going to work with F. So even if I drag it all the way down here, you know it's going to maintain the consistency of that column F, you know because it has been frozen. So I'm just going to delete all this, and then now let's try to freeze only this cell. So we're going to try to freeze only the cell. So we say equals to sum. Now to freeze the cell, you say F is the column, and you say dollar, like basically freezing the cell. So the location of that cell is 2. So we put it 2 there. So that's 5. So 5 has been frozen. And then we now add B4 and then enter. So yeah, 5 plus 4, 9. Yeah, but then now we have now realized that the cell 2 has been frozen. If I drag it down, it's going to be 34 plus 5, because that cell 2 has been frozen, which will give you 39. If I drag it down, it's going to be 28, 23 plus 5, because that cell has been frozen. Now, if I drag it to this side, to the right, sorry, if I drag it to the right, it's going to be 5, because still that cell, which is 2, has been frozen, um because which that cell 2 has been frozen, but then it is now on column G because we didn't freeze the column. So basically it will recognize this as 0 because there's nothing there, but it's still cell 2, which you can see here, and then C6, which is this number here. So which is, sorry, C6 is 5 here, so which gives you 5. So if I take it up, it's going to give me 45, because yeah, it's just using G2, which has been frozen, you know and then Now, for the one that is most likely going to be used is every time, or most likely going to be used if you want to perform, this kind of freezes is freezing the cell in entirety. So if you want to freeze the cell in entirety when you're performing calculations, or using formulas, you would freeze both the column and the row. So now this is how it's going to go. It's going to be equals to sum. Um, now say F. So we'll say dollar. So now freezing the column, and then we're also freezing the row. Another dollar, and you say 2. So now that cell 5 has been frozen, and then we'll just say B4, and then see the magic work. So yeah, so it's 9 plus 5 plus 4 is 9. You take it down, 39 because 5 plus 34, 39. Take it here, it's 50 because 45 plus 5 is 50 because I was frozen. I take it here, it gives me 5 because d5, which is 0, but this 5 is frozen, so it gives me 5. I come back here and say, okay, let's continue with this. It gives me 10 because c6 is 5 and this is frozen, 10. So wherever I drag it to, that consistency will be maintained, you know, which is those cells have been frozen. I can now even go further, go and say, okay, you know what, I want to freeze this, or I want to freeze this as well, this cell as well, which is B4. So I'll come and say, I'll say dollar. So I'm going to freeze both the column and the row, so that no matter how I drag, it's going to give me the same number. And I'll say 4. So yeah, so that's it. So it's always going to give me 9. So basically, no matter where I drag it to, it's going to give me 9. Drag it all the way here, things like that. So that's basically how to work, with these things. I can decide to freeze another one just to show clarity. So let's freeze 5. So 5. So it's always going to give me that, which is 39. So I drag it down, 39, drag it all the way here, basically, it's always going to give me that. I can continue in that manner and say, okay, I want to freeze cell 50, you know, and yeah, so on and so forth. So you can keep on continue to freeze cells, and it just gives you that. So I can say, okay, I can say equals to some let me freeze $f $3, comma, and then I'll say that's 6, and dollar b dollar 4. Let me just make this be capital. Not that it matters, but then I just like it that way. So that's 10. So it's always going to be 10. So I drag it here, 10, drag it here, 10, drag it here, 10, because those cells have been frozen. So that basically that's how it works. So that's how to freeze, your rows or your columns, or both rows and columns in Excel when you're performing calculations. And it works with any calculations you want to perform. Thank you. Yeah, so that's it basically. So that's how to freeze, your rows and your columns in Excel. You can use it when you're performing various calculations. If you want to freeze a particular row, a particular column, or want to freeze both the row and the column, to create consistency, to make something constant, make a number constant, and that's it basically. So yeah, so please like, subscribe, share with your friends. Just click on the link. Click on subscribe, please. And also like the videos as well. Stay that kind of story, and I will see you next time.
Me a no send them. Enemies around me. Me a gonna gun them. My mind on my moolah. Pay me my moolah. My mind on my moolah. Moolah. My mind is made.